Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Geekscape Book Club. As always, I am Christian Bladt, and today we're speaking about Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale, Batman: The Long Halloween, which for our visual audience, the book is disappearing into my virtual background, but that's okay. That is our topic today, and joined once again by Garrett Briones. Garrett, thank you for being here with us.
Of course, I love Halloween. I love when it's long, so I had to be here for it.
And this one's very long, and of course Eric Conner, identified on screen as Calendar Boy, which we very much appreciate. Now, Eric, I believe, like myself, you had not previously read this story. Is that correct?
Completely correct. And I'll say we've done a lot of really cool books. This is as good as any of them, I thought. This was such a great read. So thank you for bringing this into my life.
Yeah, our fearless leader over at Geekscape, Jonathan London, was horrified that I had never read this book, and I always feel like there's times where I need to give simple explanations as to why I had never read anything before. One, this is a DC book, and I had read very few DC books in my active comic collecting days. Also, this came out 1995, 1996, when I was drastically scaling back the comics. I wasn't even reading Spider-Man at this point. I was really just reading X-Men books, and it was more out of a sense of loyalty. But Garrett, you, of course, had read this before, correct?
Yes, I read it for the first time last year. That was my, it was a big blind spot, and I thought I had to finally fill that one.
Well, good for you that you did, because obviously it's and I had wanted to do this last year, but our first Geekscape book club was Batman Year One, and I really thought we shouldn't dip into a similar style book, and obviously they're very different. However, they do both cover the early part of Batman's career, and I think it was reading a little bit about it. This is kind of considered canon that replaces a lot of Batman Year Two, at least by some people's esteem. I don't think that's official. They just feel like it's more like that. And just reading the book, and you can see that Christopher Nolan pulled some inspiration from this,
A
especially
lot,
with the
actually.
featuring of Harvey Dent and Matt Reeves also for the Batman. I think the feel for this is very similar to that. Obviously, the adversaries and all that is completely different. So a lot of Batman sort of content, and some of it's just the visuals and some of the looks, I think were very much shaped by this. When you first read it last year, Garrett, what struck you the most about Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Batman: The Long Halloween?
So for me, I think the thing I've always loved about Batman is, in a similar way to Daredevil over at Marvel, he is so many different things for so many different people. He's the world's greatest detective. He's a ninja. He is just a brawling crime fighter, Cape Crusader. He's all these different things. But my favorite cut of Batman is Detective Batman. That's what I always gravitate to, and what I do like about it is similar to. It does really feel like a sequel in some ways to Year One, and I like that it is. Batman isn't super far in his career, but he's far enough that he has a rogues gallery. And I just love that it's as much about Batman and Gordon, and it's really an origin story, a long version of how Harvey Dent falls. It's not just the scene in the courtroom; it's everything leading up to it. And I love that it is the story of these three men that band together and say we're gonna do this no matter what. And by the end of it, one of them, the person that they wanted to push out there as like this is the guy that's going to save the city, is ultimately the one that succumbs to the darkness to try and beat the darkness.
Right. The idea that the only way to, I don't know, destroy the darkness is really to be at the center of it. You really have to take it in, and you can't just shine a light on it. That's not
Yeah.
really going to do anything. Eric, I know that like me, this week was when you read this for the first time. And what sort of expectations did you have going in? Eric was Eric, you were on our first show. You read year one with us, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought. I didn't want to cast aspersions and confuse
No,
you
no,
for Michael
no.
Shirley. People would be very upset if I did that, but
I mean, we do share a barber and a rabbi,
obviously,
so I can understand the confusion. I, you know, I when I had ordered this, and I go to my Kindle, and I realized I had ordered this already, like before. I don't know when. So clearly, it was on my radar for I don't know how long, and yet somehow it's one I never got around to reading. And it is incredible how you could sort of see the fingerprints of this content. Like you were mentioning, Matt Reeves' Batman, Chris Nolan's Batman, but then also you see the fingerprints of Tim Burton's work on this. You see even the Batman animated show, which
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, still, I mean, for so many of us around, Christian my age, like Kevin Conroy is still in our head the voice of Batman, and probably will always be. And so like some of the Joker stuff felt very much like if you ever saw the Christmas episode where Joker basically kidnaps everyone and puts on his own show. Like there was like kind of references to that too. So I mean, considering it had obviously an impact. Um, you know, what really struck me at the center of it was it was really emotional. Like I completely agree, Garrett, that the detective part of Batman has gotten a little bit of short shift over the years with the films. Maybe this last one that Reeves did a bit more than the others, but this was a really good it was a murder mystery, a detective story, and then a drama. Uh, some of the chapters about Mother's Day and Father's Day, I will admit, kind of stuck with me. Really, I actually had the feels for Batman there. I could connect with it in ways that definitely surprised me when I was reading a graphic novel. By the way, this sound effect, for those who can see it, uh, what is that sound, gentlemen?
So, for our audio audience,
Yes,
there's a panel where you can see Batman, and he's upside down, and he's like, "Ugh!" It's basically that.
Yeah,
that's
that.
it.
I
That's
did
it.
that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's Y, and for those who can't see it, YNGGGNN.
yeah. Well, the
So I,
at the end is really the accentuation. Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because I should also make the point of well, not my favorite iteration of Bat Mythos. Gotham, the TV series, is very heavily influenced by this style. That was sort of one of the things that I meant to say at the top, and they had a season where they pulled from elements from this, but that focus on Jim Gordon. That's a much younger Jim Gordon.
yeah,
That's he's not even a captain at that point. But the idea of so much focus, and I think that was one of the most fascinating things about year one, was just dealing with his private life, which we've seen subsequently in other media. So I can imagine getting this level of insight, getting the backstory
yeah,
to Harvey Dent, Harvey Two-Face. I think that it's great too, because I don't know, when you were talking about ordering it on your Kindle and it's showing up, Eric, I thought you were going to say, and I was like, oh, and it was like 500 pages, because it's 13 books. It's actually, I
Yep.
think 400, it's almost 400 pages. So it was a 13 issue because it's the long Halloween. It's a whole year.
Yeah.
And, some of the, there were holiday themed issues of the original series, which are, reprinted in at least the collection that I got. And it's sort of great to see, you can kind of have that fun, but it's over such a long period of time. It's hard to imagine, stories like that stretching out over a long time, because even like one of the more seminal stories I refer to a lot would be Spider-Man's Craven's Last Hunt, which was 6 parts, but it was over 2 months because it ran through all 3 Spider-Man books. So you didn't have to wait as long. You just had to wait a few weeks for the next part. It's in an age where people are used to binging shows, and the idea where you watch a show on a platform that only does it weekly Eric and I do a Loki after show here on Geekscape, and the idea of like, all right, well, we'll see what happens next week, instead of like, oh, I just stayed up 2 more hours, in the middle of the night and finished it. The idea of more than a year to finish the story. And I could imagine it was fun at that time. The online communities existed, but if you were lingering around your local comic book shop talking about like 4 or 5 months in, so whose holiday, and it's I'm glad for my sake I was able to read it in one collection, that I didn't have to
Right,
wait
right.
that long.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to think about those things. What did you think, Garrett, specifically? Let's stay on Jim Gordon for a moment. I think that year one is definitely, there's more struggles within Gordon, his home life, his professional life. At this point, I think he's married to, one, his marriage, two, married to the job of like, somebody has to stand up for Gotham City, and it's me, and so I think he's really more locked in than he is perhaps in year one. But what do you think about Jim Gordon in this story?
Oh, I love it. I always love Jimbo. I What I really like in as you said, it really does kind of play off how things were presented in year one. Is I like that all three of our trinity that we're following in this book, they all kind of have different relationships at home. You have Gordon, he's trying to find that work-life balance, and by the end we see that there is still love with he and his wife, that he's fully committed to her more than he is the job. And then you have someone like Bruce he goes home to Alfred, but he can't quite figure out his relationship with Selina. The entire book they keep going back and forth, both as Batman and Catwoman, also as Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne. And then you have Harvey, who he just completely kind of neglects his wife, aside from like a few little moments, but he can't find that balance. And so that's what I like, that ultimately we got to see three versions of it. But honestly, Gordon is probably the person who has his crap together the most of the three, which coming off of
Right.
year one, you maybe don't expect. But I love that, Jim's got it all figured out in a way.
Right. Well, and I think too, it's like the marriage seems like new enough.
Yeah.
It's a baby, so
Mhm.
so there's a sense of maybe his wife here a little more patient than she might
Yes.
be in
Yeah.
5 years, but also he's still on the flip side, maybe a little bit more in the marriage, so to speak.
Mhm.
Like, his balance is feels like I
Yeah.
agree with you here. It's a little bit more even here. What's interesting too, so you're talking about the sort of the three shades of these men and how their various lives sort of eat at each other. So
Mhm.
you have Harvey Dent, whose wife like idolizes him. Like Barbara was basically understanding,
Mhm.
but you could tell she wasn't necessarily gonna. It wasn't going to be limitless, her
Yeah.
understanding, and
Yeah.
maybe it's because we do know that marriage will run into trouble down the road. So that might be adding to the read or my own read of it. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, you had Dent's wife, which has a great payoff later. The idea that she just the ground he walks on, she worships him, and is just like the most dutiful sort of wifey wife
Yeah.
imaginable. And she seemed to look past all this sort of things and problems. And then meanwhile, you got Bruce. There is one frame of Selina who's basically saying, hey, we're gonna hang out tonight, and in the panel is like he says no. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
dude, what is wrong with you? Like, it is the most sexy I've seen Selina Kyle, I think, in any Batman comic book. And he's like, nah, I gotta go home and stare at the wall. and and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, dude, come on. But you see, right, the push and pull within
Yeah.
him where he doesn't even know how to commit to anyone at all.
Yeah.
And I think again the three of them together is what gives this story such a surprising dramatic heart at the center of it, and how they can't find a way to balance it all. So it's like the long Halloween of their own lives.
Yeah.
It's just ongoing trying to figure this stuff out.
The interesting thing that as we were reading it, we're talking specifically about Harvey Dent and his wife. as I'm reading that, I was just thinking, I unexpectedly it reminded me of another literary figure that perhaps was not a connection I was expecting to make. There's the idea of like we'll start a family, we'll have kids when we're ready, and you're just reading it and it's so sad. And I was not expecting to be transported to, of course, Muppet Christmas Carol, with the idea of the older Ebenezer Scrooge being reminded, like, oh yeah, that Belle girl, boy, she was perfect. All she really wanted was to get married. And I was like, yeah, I just gotta save some more money. He's like, oh man, I just gotta kill some more crazy super villains, not even super villains, but just the weirdos in Gotham City. And don't
The
worry, I'm
mob.
gonna put them away. And it's very sad, and it's a fascinating turn as it goes along. And it's tough when a book is 25 or more years old to say that, do we talk about spoilers or not. But there's just a tremendous reveal with his wife, with Mrs. Dent. What was her
Gilda.
first name? Gilda. Thank you.
Gilda.
I was just like, I knew it didn't quite fit. It was just like, oh, Gilda.
Was anyone
Yeah.
named Gilda 25 years ago? Like,
I mean,
I feel like
Gilda
that
Radner
sounds
had
right.
Gilda Radner
She
had passed. Yeah,
Right.
so I
That
don't
was the
know.
last
Every once in a
Gilda.
while, you get that. But one of the things I was sort of touching on earlier was the idea that we get so many characters from the Batman mythos. You get Solomon Grundy. Honestly, he doesn't not need to show up in the story at all, but it's very cool to get him. And I mean, did you guys both read this the same way, where for this iteration he had not met Joker before? Did you take it that way as well? Or maybe it was like he knew of
Yeah.
him. It was sort of like talking about the Joker in a way, like, I hear about this, sort of at the end of Batman Begins, where he's like, oh, these cards were left around. I'll look into this. It was almost more like, oh, I've heard of this Joker. They didn't really seem to know each other. Or was that just me projecting? What do you think, Eric?
Oh, you said Eric or Garrett.
I said, well, they do sound. I said Eric, but
Okay.
I
There we
didn't
go.
realize.
Hit that C hard.
I'm gonna have to switch the
Hit
last
it real
names.
hard. Yeah, it's funny now you say it, like, okay, that actually really makes sense. I don't think I was reading some of the sort of an additional material afterwards. I kind of wanted to go into it a little bit blind. And so afterwards, seeing this idea, it was like kind of like a Batman Year 2. And then when I read that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense, because it didn't really strike me one way or the other. It just because Joker's role in this was so small and kind of almost like off in its own little corner. So what Batman knew of him, I didn't really think about, because Batman was so just not even focused on him. But I think you probably could make a good argument that, yeah, they haven't really actually dealt with each other yet. But it's kind of a nice sense of like, they're going to enter each other's orbits very soon.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of it's an interesting moment in their dynamic, because in the context of this story, I mean, Poison Ivy has a greater impact on the story than Joker does. Joker is one of many more annoyances than anything. What do you think, Garrett, in this
Get that tea.
of Joker in this book?
I kind of take it in the sense that they've had some clashes, but maybe they haven't had that defining clash. Going off of the end of Year 1, there is that sort of tease that there's a guy out there named the Joker. I kind of think it's like they've bumped a few times, but they haven't really defined that rivalry. But I like that the Joker's used in the story, but I love that it is just he's used for 2 holidays, and then you don't see him until the end when all the bad guys, when Dent teams all the bad guys up, which I will say, not a criticism, but Jeff Loeb, he also wrote Batman Hush. He kind of reuses the ideas of a big mystery that features every Batman villain, and also there's a plot point where Poison Ivy controls someone whose name ends with man for a few issues. That's a little crutch that he falls back on. That
Yeah.
I realized reading this that happens later. Just a little aside.
Yeah, well, sometimes if it ain't broke, you're not going to fix it. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, and it was interesting, because Scarecrow is fairly, you know, easily pushed aside in the story, and I mean, it is interesting because obviously the underworld part of Gotham City figures into even the Tim Burton movies, but it wasn't the central focus. And I mean, if you have to isolate, if you're only using a sentence to summarize Long Halloween, you have to talk about how it deals with the crime families, and the family looking to muscle in from Chicago, and I always love the distinction that Chicago, New York, Gotham, Metropolis are all separate places, because I think as someone who didn't really read DC Comics, I just always felt like, the Gotham was New York and Metropolis was Chicago, but it's not the case. And if you follow the Snyderverse, they're apparently across the bay from each other, so it only just makes it more confusing as to where these places are, but and I mean, and then there's scenes they're obviously, I mean, they're right out of the Godfather. They're right out of numerous Scorsese movies, and I think it's more homage. I don't think it's like, oh, this worked in that movie, we're going to use it here. I don't think major things, it felt derivative. But what did you think, Eric, of some of the nods in there? And I mean, some scenes that are several pages long where there's no costume characters. There's no costume characters in their secret identities. These are really, you're like reading, an artistic rendering of basically a mob family storyline.
When I think they set the table pretty nicely for then what Dark Knight did. Because, I mean, by the way, they actually do have a direct reference to The Godfather. Try the veal, it's the best of the city. I believe is,
and there was something about a cannoli as well.
Yeah.
Those were two moments. Yeah,
but I think too, to their credit, it wasn't just like kind of like geeky fandom for The Godfather or for kind of more generic kind of mobsters. Like, I thought the family dynamic was actually really interesting. This idea of these various like kids, of these very powerful people, and who are they, and how they're trying to make their kind of own way, and even like having a wedding early on in this thing, right? I mean, that harkens back right there. He does. Come on, Vernon, have the veal. It's the best in the city. And in fact, the next panel, which I don't think I sent you, Christian, was a like a medium wide exterior like image of a car outside a restaurant that was almost visually identical to one of the shots in that sequence in The Godfather. But I think the family dynamics is really what kind of stuck out most. Was this sense of like people are losing their loved ones and like feeling it, like, so even though it is almost everyone who shed a tear also shed some blood, but the truth is, like, feel for them, you understand their pain, and these two families that maybe would have had a chance to actually become like a super group, but in essence all this is tearing them apart. And I think they were very smart in how they grounded it in the very basic elements of family, as opposed to trying to go kind of like all geeky with the crime syndicate. Like the actual crime part of it's, weirdly enough, it's kind of small. It's a bit off panel, I guess I'd put it. You don't necessarily see so much the crime dealings, but you see the consequences of what they do.
Yeah, what did you think of the family dynamic, Garrett, in terms of just the look, when you're telling a story over 13 issues, you actually have plenty of time in which to try and capture that. What did you think of that as we saw it, Garrett?
What I really like is that in a lot of ways, the Falcone family is, they're running Gotham, and I like that this story really kind of is like the last days of the mob having the grasp on Gotham City. Carmine is called the Roman, and Salvatore Moroni is called the Boss. Like, they have these little nicknames, but now they're starting to lose their foothold to people like the Joker, the Mad Hatter. Like, these super criminals are starting to push and Batman being around as well, starting to push this old world mentality of what a crime boss is. They're pushing them out, and it's like they're going extinct essentially. And I like that it is the fall of the last family that is holding this all together, and that even it's not super really kind of said in this story, but they very much hint at it that Selena Kyle is the daughter of Carmine Falcone, and even she's part of this new breed of criminal. And by the end of the story, she's really besides someone that is revealed to be alive, she's really the last connection to this crime family that is slowly crumbling from the inside and losing their grasp on Gotham City.
Yeah, and I think that it's as I referenced, that there's a lot of this that you'll see in Gotham, and I mean, dealing with the actual crime families was a big part, especially in the early seasons. But they immediately got Penguin into it, and
Right.
I am particularly critical of that show because they loved the actor who played Penguin so much, who I think was great, that they put Penguin in literally every single episode of the show. And I was like, boy, it would be better if, I don't know, out of a 22 episode season, he was in like 10 or 15. It was just like, you don't have to find a way to get him in there every week. And that was one of the things that I didn't love about it. But and I think I didn't even think of it until you said it, that this really is the point where crime was run by just regular people, nobody wearing
Well,
fancy outfits or makeup or named after birds or clowns or things. What were you gonna say, Eric?
yeah, when also too, like, one of the subplots is like they're actually trying to get tied up with the banks.
Mhm.
So it's no longer about just like how can they launder their money, through all sorts of nefarious schemes, but they're actually, in some ways, when you get connected with a legitimate bank, that means you're legitimate. And the how much money they burned, by the way, I thought, if anything, I was hoping that would pay off a little bit more, because it
Yeah.
is a moment. I mean, Dark Knight famously has that too, but
Mhm.
I was like, wow, like, they burned a lot of money. Then they didn't really talk about that very much. But that idea of becoming legit, I think, Christian, we might have talked about this scene in a different episode, but there's a great moment in The Sopranos when they're trying to shake down a Starbucks that moves to the neighborhood, and it's not called Starbucks, but
No,
some
yeah.
coffee chain. And Garrett, I don't know if you saw this, but the
Mm.
guys show up and like, yeah, we're here with the neighborhood protection watch. And so in essence, they're just trying to shake him down for
Yeah.
protection money. And the store manager's like, yeah, I can't do that. I can't give you a nickel. They count every bean in corporate. And
Yeah.
even if you do something to me, then they'll bring in someone else and it's going to be the same story. And the guys come out and they're lamenting, there's no business anymore for the little guy. and,
Yeah.
and so you're right, Garrett. It's like it is like that swan song, and this came out with, I'm sorry, it was middle of the 90s. This
So
got
it's 95 into
yeah,
96. Yeah.
right. So I mean, even like think like Vegas around that time was totally became what it is now,
Yeah.
like this sort of very legitimate, corporations run by the banks. By the mid 90s, it was
Mm.
the sort of gangster foothold there was
Yeah.
gone, long gone, in fact. So yeah, there's not much room for the little guy anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I
A real
think
shame.
that I think that becomes an interesting thing about, Batman, he's really the Batman still in a lot of ways, it's Gotham City at this point, it's I don't know. I feel like at this point that the story happens, you could live in Gotham City and just somehow, you don't read the papers or whatever. You don't actually know about the Batman. Whereas like a lot of times when we see him in the movies, like everybody knows,
Mm.
what
Yeah.
he is. And it it's further along than year one, but it's so interesting that he's
Yeah.
not as well established, And I like the scene where he goes to the bar where he's like, yeah, I'm here during the day. Usually he doesn't use the word shtick, but he's like, yeah, usually my shtick plays better at night. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I could see it. It's like, oh, look, Adam West just walked in here. It's like, I can see everything about him. He's not hiding in the
Mhm.
shadows. And yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of fun things that they deal with. I think that because it was this serialized, drawn out story that was conceived over 13 parts, it has a good degree of really mystery and suspense from chapter to chapter, issue to issue, in terms of what it is. Did either of you guys feel like you had an idea who Holiday was? And they were always, even when Calendar Man would say, well, he is very lucky for her, that, you know what I mean? Like,
Right,
even
right.
Calendar Man was just, well, was right, actually. Calendar Man
Yeah.
seemed to know that there were two of them, actually, but I'll ask you first, Garrett. Well, did you know going into this, like, had you had like the ending sort of figured out from something else, or did you actually not know who Holiday was when you started reading?
No, when I went in, I had no idea. All I knew going in was that it was heavily pulled from, and I knew that Calendar Man featured heavily in it. I mostly knew Calendar Man from the Batman Arkham game series. And so that was really I didn't know. And yeah, I was very much surprised, especially with they present somebody and then there's a switch, and then even at the end when we're just kind of told all the details in thought bubbles, basically. We were all There's also a third person that is put forth, that maybe it was actually three people, and that one person wasn't doing it the whole time and someone else stepped in. So I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of misdirects and redirects all the way through to the end. I
Mhm.
think that that's usually, when you have the feeling that the third party is definitely getting away with it,
Yes.
because the second party made sure, and
Yeah.
you've seen that in other things. What did you think, Eric, as you were going through? Did you have like a Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia board where you were putting all your theories as to who Holiday was and following all the strings, trying to figure it out?
Most of that energy is right now dedicated to trying to figure out what's in Loki sauce. So yeah, I don't know if I have much bandwidth for anything else. I have to admit, when I read mystery stories, detective stories, when I watch the films, I I don't necessarily sit there and actively try and figure out who did it. I will admit, like, I know some people are sitting there, even my younger son, will come in, and more times than not, if we're watching something like that, he kind of figures it out fast, which means he's either going to be a great detective or worse, potentially a fabulous criminal. So I really would. I love that image. I
Yeah, I'm
would.
gonna leave it
That
up
was
there for a little
Charlie.
while.
For those not seeing it, Charlie doing his Charlie thing, with papers everywhere and his eyes bugging out
Yeah,
wildly.
there's
I,
just some memes live on for a reason. And I'm sorry, finish your
right.
thought, Eric.
Oh yeah. No, I was suspecting it was a female, but it did seem like they leaned a little hard into the aunt and the daughter. So
Yeah,
we were talking, was it Carla and Sophia Gigante, or who, by the way, I love those characters so much that part of me kind of wanted them to be it, but
yeah.
I would have been off by many miles had I actually guessed. So it's good. It's good. I don't have that Charlie in me.
Now there's an animated film of this, which if I had tackled this appropriately, I would have watched before this instead of finish reading it this afternoon. So I'd be intrigued to see how it translates, because it would then beg the question. They were talking about elements of this. I don't think it translates well into a movie, because like you would have to skip holidays, and that's sort of the whole point, is it's over a long time. I think it would very much work as like a 13-part miniseries. Well, on HBO Max, I assume, is where it would go, but obviously Batman really gets saved for the big screen, because even, we've talked about Gotham, he's not Batman in that. I mean, it's like about Gotham before Batman, even though they try to bring a lot of Batman in, because It's like the Krypton show. It's like, what if you get Superman without Superman? Well, this is Batman without Batman. So it doesn't always work. I think that's why stories like this in year one are so interesting. But I wouldn't want to see that, like, Matt Reeves' like third movie is Long Halloween, because I'm just like, well, the last one was 3 hours, so well, this would be seven. I can't even imagine telling the story in that
But,
way.
Christian,
But go ahead.
did you get? No, I was just going to ask you. Did you guess, were you
Mhm.
trying to guess?
I got convinced in the middle of it that it was Harvey Dent,
Okay.
because Batman was so sure, and
Mhm.
it's one of the last few issues. Gordon's like, you knew that, didn't you? Why didn't you tell me anything? And he's just like, because I'm hoping I'm wrong. So it started to seem that way, and it would be great to not have had multiple instances in my life where I know that Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face, because if you can believe in Harvey Dent as like, oh, this is the DA who actually is going to clean up Gotham City, and there's no notion of him going astray at any point for any reason, whatever's thrown in his face, whatever, coins he gets into his possession, it would probably be harder to believe, but
Mhm.
knowing where he's going, I think, sort of clouded it. But yeah, so and anybody who is taking this in after the fact or in the live chat now, let us know if you read this and you had thoughts. If you haven't read this, we're doing our best to not spoil it for you. I would definitely encourage it. I think anybody who listened to our first show and did read year one, this would be a great follow up for it.
Mhm.
I have not read year two, and I believe there was also a year three. I haven't read any of that stuff. I've not read a lot of Batman. I
Mhm.
liked the recent series they did, which was called Batman 1989, which like continued uh, the Tim Burton verse, if
Mhm.
it had stayed like that before becoming the Schumacher verse, as it were. And but in terms of Batman stories, when I was a kid, the X-Men had been around only 25 years. I felt like I could wrap my head around it. But when I was a kid, Batman had already been around for 50 years. I think it was just
Mhm.
that simple. And it's like, oh, where do I start? But I'm very glad to have this show as an excuse to, the whole concept of the show is to read stuff like this. We talked about Catwoman a little bit earlier. Uh, or as Christopher Walken refers to her, Catwoman. We talk about Catwoman in this, and Eric, you said something that I was thinking about when you said it. There was the idea that she's presented in this way where she's never come off as sexier as Catwoman, and I was thinking, yeah, it's like she's Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, and Eartha Kitt, like all like exponentially somehow. They packed everything about each of them
The
into
best
one,
of each of them.
the best of each of them. And look, those are my cat women. All right, if somebody's got Michelle Pfeiffer, man, and Zoe Kravitz was actually fantastic. I'm a bit critical of the Matt Reeves movie, but I thought that casting was actually great. I thought she was phenomenal in it. But I think that she does show up a lot, and I love
Mhm.
when it's not Bruce. Batman asks her, like, why are you always showing up every time I get near him? And it's like, well, why are you here? Like, why are you
Mhm.
showing up so often?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just here when you are. What do you think, Garrett, about Catwoman in this? She does show up a lot of times, but each appearance is pretty short, even as Selena Kyle.
Yeah, I really enjoy it because you get to see her, as Selena Kyle. She's trying to maybe pursue something with Bruce, but obviously he's too entrenched in what's going on with Holiday. So then even when she's as Catwoman, it's almost like you can tell she wants to get involved in this situation, and she doesn't really, she saves Bruce from poison ivy. She kind of interjects. That's really the only time she does something that's not related to Carmine. And yeah, I like that the story doesn't straight up just tell you that she believes that Carmine is her father. That, and there's this own, she has her own push and pull in this whole story of do I get involved? Do I stay out of it? Am I pursuing Bruce Wayne? Why am I pursuing Bruce Wayne if that's the case? What is she's kind of trying to figure out, like I was saying, how the old crime is out and the new crime is there. She's kind of stuck in between because she is a costume criminal, but she is also maybe related to this family that runs the city, and by the end of it she's kind of the last person that's related to it. And so she's kind of like caught in between the new Gotham and the old Gotham that are kind of warring against each other in this story. Christian, you muted.
Oh, I think you're muted. What Christian meant to say was...
No. But for our visual audience, this is a panel that has Catwoman and Batman. And Eric, you actually sent this panel. So that's why I think we'll start there, and then your thoughts on Catwoman.
So this is one of their many. I don't even know if in most cases you call it fights, right? Because it's I don't know. It's like fair amount of hugging. A fair amount of hugging with them.
Yeah, it's like sparring. You know, it's the Fox Daredevil movie. Basically, they don't do Daredevil and Elektra don't fight really. You know,
or I'm gonna go real old school on you here. When Mike Tyson fought James Bone Crusher Smith, and all he did was tie him up the whole fight, so he didn't actually have a chance at knocking him out.
Yeah,
and so this line here, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought her back. It did remind me of some of those great exchanges between Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Keaton in Batman Returns, which I will always defend. I think Batman Returns was a better film than Batman from 1989, and I guess I'll fight people on that, but I would hug them closely.
I wish I had that. I had that drop of Homer Simpson of "ooh, hot take," because I would definitely hit it right now. But I don't have those kind of drops. Not on this show.
But sentiment is felt. I think.
Yes.
We get it. And I found like their exchanges a couple times. I was like, wait, do they know who each other is?
Yeah,
because it seemed to, and they even repeated certain lines again in that way that in Batman Returns is the reason. Batman and Catwoman figured out who the other was. They actually did that once or twice, but I do think with her saving Bruce Wayne from Poison Ivy, which I thought was a great little moment there. It did seem still like they maybe were pretending, but at least put up the charade of like not quite knowing who the other is. But yeah, their exchanges in both Selina, Bruce, and Batman, Catwoman style, I thought was great. And, their sort of push and pull of like, you feel like what makes them such a fascinating couple is why they could never be a couple. It's because they're just too similar.
Right, exactly, and I feel like now we have to shout out, Anne Hathaway in Dark Knight Rises, and do we have to talk about Halle Berry? I feel like we shouldn't. I think we should draw the line there. We've mentioned
Right.
basically all the Catwomen, and there's of course the young Selina Kyle on Gotham, but she's not actually Catwoman. I think she just has like a headband with cat ears, but it's a very different aspect of it. But yeah, it is such an interesting character, and what makes the character, obviously she's interesting on her own, but just sort of the fact that she seems to very often have the upper hand on Batman in terms of, at the very least, being able to get away from him when he's not expecting it. There's a couple of those, and that's probably the most fun. Here I thought in the book was watching the two of them. Is there a character for you, Garrett, that stands out? Somebody that we haven't talked about yet? Maybe a minor character or someone that I'm just missing at this point.
I really did. I really enjoy Sophia. I really like that she has this return to Gotham. We learned that she has this relationship with Salvatore Maroni, which I just love to say. I love Salvatore Maroni's name. Anytime it gets brought up in a Batman thing, I just love the name Salvatore Maroni. It's just the best.
It's almost like you have to
Yeah.
do it in sort of like the caricature of like Salvatore Moroni. You know, you have to take your fingers up like that. You have to say it like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Geekscape does not approve of the mockery of
You're
Italian.
right. No,
I'm
yeah, that's
just
right.
putting it out there.
If you want mockery of Italian Americans, go to Tukey Soup. But what were you going to say, Garrett?
Yeah, I really like that it is, she returns. You kind of get the sense that she was going off and doing her own thing, but the crumbling of her family kind of brings her back. She wants to be at her father's side, and I think one of the kind of saddest moments in the whole book is when on Father's Day at the very end of that issue, she gives him a card, like, and she says, "Happy Father's Day, Papa," and he just says, "I appreciate the gesture," and he just kind of walks off. And then we see that that Selena is obviously out there watching, and she's not getting to experience that. I really
that's
like her
that's one
character.
of those scenes that would make Harry Chapin cry and just throw his hands up and like I can't even. I mean, come on. Sorry, what were you saying, Garrett?
No, yeah. I really like Sophia. I was sad that she didn't make it out of this story. Spoilers, but not related to Holiday, but well, actually. But it was a non-holiday death, I should say. But I really did enjoy her injection into the story.
Let's talk about some of the deaths, and it happens in a very stylized way. And this is the Thanksgiving one that Eric had highlighted, and they're often black and white. I think they're always black and white, and it's sort of a very stylistic
with like a splash
choice.
of color.
With a splash of color in this case, the cornucopia, the Horn o' Plenty, as it were, which I believe was Eric's nickname in college, Horn o' Plenty. But you have, and I guess, I don't know, it's a choice, and I feel like we've seen it before. The switching to black and white, I guess it makes it, it calls attention to it, but it makes it less gory to look at, I guess, because ultimately, despite what any of us man children might say, comic books are a medium for children. This story is certainly not one. I'm not going to go toss this on my 8-year-old's bed and be like, have at it, but maybe when he's 12, I don't know. But actually, in the middle of that thought, Eric, do you feel like either of your kids would appreciate this? Is it a little bit beyond them? And tell our audience how old they are for way of comparison.
So that then when my kids get taken away from me, we'll know why. No, but my boys are 12 and 15, and I'd have no qualms with them reading this, actually. I mean, my 12-year-old he was supposed to see, as these kids call it, the FNAF, Five Nights at Freddy's. And yeah, they call it the FNAF. Or maybe FNAF.
I didn't even realize they called it the FNAF. Okay.
FNAF. And so, I mean, this would be nothing just to read this. And I think the violence is sort of stylized enough as well that it's a little bit gory, but it's not like The Boys or Generation V where they're just like, you ever want to see what a body looks like when it explodes from someone on the inside expanding quickly? Well, there you go.
Especially, I mean, I was in middle school the first time I saw, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and things like that. Now kids have stuff like, The Walking Dead on television, I mean, yes, it's cable television, but
honestly, if it keeps them from the real creepy stuff out there, I'll take it. Like, you want to read this, and that means you're not surfing on the web. Please, thank you.
It's a great point, but from sort of the storytelling choice, let's focus on that for a moment, Eric. Calling attention to it, but also maybe as I stated, it does make it less gory, but it also makes it sort of more poignant, aka more artistic, right?
Yeah, what I think too, my older son, we recently watched Heat, so I think he's gotten a little bit more into this notion of like a crime saga, and I feel like this falls under that category. In fact, he's calling me as we speak.
He's like, great. Can I read Batman Long Halloween?
Right.
It's on your Kindle twice for some reason.
Yeah, can I borrow your Blockbuster card? So I think like the epic scope of this though is done in such a way. I think the holidays makes it a little more accessible. You mentioned before something I was going to say, that this would be an amazing miniseries. A limited series on HBO Max. I completely agree. Like, in the way that maybe Justice League, the Snyder version should have been. Like, I think this lends itself perfectly to it. It's really, like, I think it takes advantage of episodic storytelling very smartly. I love that sense of, even though we all read it in the course of, maybe a day or two or a handful of hours, like, I think you could really feel that sense of the passage of time. And, and it was a way of maybe for a younger reader, a way to digest the storytelling more so than if it was written in a way like The Godfather or Godfather 2.
Mm-hmm.
Or The Godfather 3. Let's make
You
sure.
mean the only real hot take, only real Godfather?
Hot take, yeah, that is. But I think that the artistry, it is one of the things about comic books that it has over some of these other mediums. Sort of some of the images, like what we're looking at on the screen right now. What did you think about that, Garrett, as you were reading it?
I love that,
To put on my film school hat from what I learned in color theory, what I like to look at it as is black and white, because they're kind of presenting it in a, this is a very black and white world. Is this a bad deed? Is this a good deed? There's no there, and then there are shades of gray even in the coloring to kind of like, we're bad people are dying, but is that, these are guys that rough up people, they kill people for money. And I think it's presenting that kind of idea that this is a black and white world. This is a black and white crime that's happening. Some people see it as good, some people see it as bad. That's how I just, even sitting here right now thinking about it, that's how I kind of view these dips to black, white, gray, and then obviously whatever kind of color is related to either the crime or the holiday that's going on.
Yeah, no, I think that the visual representation throughout, yes, and the individual issues, the February issue, it's pink and it has a heart. The March, it's green for St. Patrick's Day, and it's all very well reflected. And I think that there obviously was some great care put into the way it was presented. And it's so if I'm very intrigued to see how I guess it was direct to DVD market, but I'm pretty sure it's probably streaming at this point. But I would be very interested in seeing it. I believe it's a 2-part movie because it is so long. But I would be very interested in checking that out. What are our sort of final thoughts, takeaway here? Our Jerry Springer final thought for the moment, Eric. We've talked a little bit about the legacy of this book, sort of the way we, each connected with it. And, I think it really does capture the feel of when Batman works, it's stories that are told in this way. That's at least my opinion. What are you thinking, as we summarize this, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder of why Batman, more than any superhero character, is the one that seems to constantly get rebooted, rewritten, redone, reimagined. Because you realize, like, the world they've created with Gotham, with, people on both sides of the law, like from the police to the gangsters to the more colorful villains, it's such a broad spectrum. Even like Solomon Grundy, who, that's a character who usually, not too much character depth to a Solomon Grundy, but then even the way they used him here, where like Bruce calls him like a lost soul, and then delivered him like a panel I really was floored by. He delivered him a Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah.
And that sounds cheesy until you look at that moment in the comic book and you realize it's not. And I think that's the thing this comic does well. Like Joker shows up, Scarecrow shows up, but they show up in a way where it didn't feel like fan service. It felt like, inevitably, if you hang out in Gotham for 13 months, you are going to come across these various characters. But I think what's so strong in that storytelling is it didn't get in the way of really this wonderful mystery that was at the center of it. One that it sounds like none of us really guessed who the killers actually were. And, I would have been interested to see what it was like to read this one issue at a time. I'm glad I didn't have to, because I tore through this. Like, this was, I think all the books we've read in this book club, this is the one I think I read the fastest, just in terms of, like, I didn't want to stop reading it.
Yeah, and I think the George Perez Wonder Woman was the slowest, just because it was so dense. I thought the
And
artwork was
yeah,
beautiful, but I think Chris
and the
Claremont would
tone
flip
of
through
it
those
was a little.
pages and say, "Yeah, probably too many words on it." I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
And I remember the tone of that one. It got
Yeah,
really weirdly dark at times too. This one, somehow, I think it managed to find a really interesting tone that permeated all 13 issues. It didn't feel, like we've had this issue with some of the MCU shows we've watched recently, where every episode's like, wait, is this the same show? But
yeah.
this one here, it all felt very much like a very singular vision all throughout.
Right, and I think when you have two creators who are assigned to a project, you're able to have them spend, possibly even more than a year on it.
Sure.
But, when some of the best arcs that are told, in regular issues of a monthly book, a lot of times, you have fill-in artists, and there's some great stories that just the inconsistency of the artwork. More recently, things I've read from Marvel, it's just so disappointing. There are times where you'll like click on to the next issue or flip it open, however you're reading it, and you go, "Oh my God, who drew this?" This is not the issue at all in this. But there are things that I've read where I'm like, oh man, I really wish they had the same creators for that. Same question for you, Garrett, as you kind of look back on this, looking at it again now and having read it a year ago. Do you feel like for you personally the enduring legacy is of Batman: The Long Halloween?
I think it's one of those, seminal books that you're always told about, that, sometimes you maybe have a sort of, you're kind of worried to read it to see if it lives up to the legacy that's been built from it. You hear that so many things pull from it, and you're kind of worried, like, am I going to read this and it not really connect for me? But for myself, I think it is one of those ones. It's like a Watchmen, where you read it and you're like, there's a reason why it is spoken of so highly. It
Yeah.
is just, it's this lovely epic. Like, it truly is an epic told over the span of a year that is just about a crime family falling, but a new breed of crime rising. It's about three men who have kind of varying degrees of justice, and what the line is. And it's just this beautiful tale that weaves in all these different things, things of like family and living up to legacy and what legacy is, and do the sins of the father impact the children, and what it, just all these things. And I just love how it all coalesces. There's also there is a quasi sequel. I think it is treated as a sequel. Loeb and Sale both return for it. It's called Batman: Dark Victory. It takes place after this, and it's the origin of this universe's Robin. It retells the tale of Dick Grayson. And that's the book I very much, I've tried to seek out. I will say, if you're going to read this book for the first time, or Dark Victory, or something I read it, like I mentioned, like Batman Hush, I think this is a case where you maybe want to do your due diligence and do some research into one of the creators. I would say Jeff Loeb. There's been some things in recent years that sometimes you have to figure out if you can separate the artist from the art. I think that whether you're going to pick up this book, Dark Victory, whatever, I think you should do that due diligence. But just looking at the art, this book is incredible. I very much hits that sweet spot of what I look for in a Batman story.
And I'll second, by the way, Hush. I really enjoyed that one.
That's actually one of these I would like to do somewhere down the road. We can't, I think Batman's about once a year, but I would like to get to that. And the artwork is one of the reasons why I do something I usually never do on streams that I do, and pop myself out, because I want to be able to, show off the artwork. It's a lot easier to get rid of Eric, and show it off. But I do like to show it. Anyway, it was a wonderful read and a great chat with all of you. The next installment of the Geekscape Book Club, I believe, will end up being in early December, and I am thinking of doing something holiday themed, and that would be Tom King's Vision, which there are elements to this which was very well represented in WandaVision. but just the first few episodes. So that is something that and look, I actually took this out of the library, the Burbank Library, and look at that. So Garrett's got it right there. You keep holding those up. Yeah, see, look, he's got it right there. So perfect.
Yeah.
That's
Look what I
Not
got.
even planned. Not even planned.
Do you have Power Pack number 1?
Yeah.
I, of course, also have Power Pack number 1.
Yeah.
Signed by Louise Simonson. But
mine is too. Oh, you got to be kidding me. Yeah.
Well, all right.
Wow. It's amazing.
So
Either of us got married.
That flex backfired, didn't it?
No, you just flexed us deeper into our own geekdom.
Should I lie and say it's also signed by artist June Brigman? It's not, but if she were ever doing a signing, I'd have her sign that in Uncanny X-Men 204. But that being a big nerd flex, that'll be our next installment, and I was very excited that this was on hand at the library. So this is going to be one of those instances where I read the book way before we actually do the show. So follow us on social media to get the exact date on that when we'll be streaming the conversation live. And Eric has had an idea that maybe in a future episode, we'll just put aside some time. Maybe we'll talk about the animated version along Halloween. Have you ever seen that, Garrett?
I have, yes.
Okay. Is it worth our watching and just spending a few minutes on, or is it gonna
to talk around it? Just strike solidarity wise, I will say yes, and I think it would be very interesting to do it. It's one of those adaptations where you hope that changes are made, and obviously some changes are made from medium to medium, but it's also fun to watch if you're someone who already knows the mystery. I would say the mystery itself is different.
Yeah, I actually thought that the Killing Joke animated movie that came out a few years ago, people there was a pretty tremendous negative backlash, but in general, I thought the parts that were adapted from the story, I thought they did a great job with. But Garrett might feel differently. No, I think he just got disconnected. But when he comes back, there he goes.
Sorry,
oh my God,
my
don't talk about it.
is weird. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I think it even changed your audio source, but that's right. We're wrapping up, and in terms of reading, we did a special episode of Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape earlier in the week. We do weekly Friday episodes talking about Loki, but we did a special where we talked to Andrew DeMann, who runs the Claremont Run Twitter page. It's actually a research project that he got a grant for in Canada, and the book, The Claremont Run: Subverting Gender in the X-Men. We did a special on that, and Eric, you were there. I am already thinking like I could have done 5 parts on that, and talked about it.
It's really in-depth research, but the book's actually also, I think as I was, per our last interview with him, it's also like very accessible. Like you don't just read this and feel like you're looking at graphs and feel like you're in like, I don't know, an economics course or something. Like it actually was done really smartly. And it made, as I was telling you guys last time, it made me actually rethink like that when I was reading comic and looking how characters were dressed. I found myself focusing on that even with this read. So
there's a lot of there's a section that focuses on torn clothing. Yes. So, but you can find that here on the Geekscape YouTube channel, and it'll be up on the Marvel Movie Talk audio feed before too long. Just like our show, which we talk Loki every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So please join us for that. As we're recording this, we have 2 more episodes of Loki, and we're looking forward to talking about that. And of course, you can find me Twitter, Instagram at Christian DMZ, my personal podcast, The Blattcast, BLADTCAST. And Who Are These Broadcasters? Tuesday afternoons on the Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel. Lots of promotion. But Eric Conner, where can you be found?
You can find me at Count Eric Conner over at Instagram and over at the X. I hang out there. You're welcome to say hello. Yes, the big X. And Garrett, where can we find you?
That's what I was going to ask. Thank you for
me
beating me to the punch. Yeah.
I care about Garrett.
Thank you. Garfield. So you can find me on at Not Just a Guy Prod. That is my quote unquote production entity. That is where my podcast, Not Just a Guy, is putting out new episodes. That's on Instagram, X, and TikTok. And this Halloween, this Tuesday, we have a new episode with Sad Girl Cinemas, Caitlin Scardino and Balanice. They are two filmmakers. They run their own production company. They are great gals. Had a great talk with them. Following week, November 7th, I have Ken Knapsack of the Knapsack Network Force Center, a long-running broadcaster and podcaster, have him on. So some very fun episodes are coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Well, that sounds great, and everybody make sure they follow Garrett so that they can be on top of everything. And we'll be back next time talking vision. And as always, as long as they keep writing, we'll keep reading them, and we'll see you guys next time. See you, men, women, children, and everyone next time. I don't want to
Happy
just say
Halloween.
see you guys. I was talking to these two guys, but I also want to see